I'm calling to order the special meeting of the Ross Town Council. It's the annual budget workshop, Thursday, April 28, 2022. The first item of business is the posting of the agenda. Has the agenda been posted?
Yes, it has.
Okay. The next item is open time for public expression. This is limited to 3 minutes per speaker on items that are not on the agenda. Council members can't discuss these items. Is there anyone here who would like to make a comment? Yes. And let's see, let me time it. Maybe use one of ours. Otherwise, it won't go through to.
Hi, my name is Doug Ryan. I live at 74 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard in Ross. This is from the April 25th, 2022 meeting of the Flood Advisory Board. Beach Pool introduced himself as the mayor pro tem. That implies he was speaking in an official capacity. He then said, and I quote, "For this project to go forward, we need to persuade FEMA, grant a variance to their current provision," end quote. Beach, what exactly specifically do you mean by current provision? Do you mean the no-rise provision?
You know, council members aren't allowed to
Okay.
to
respond.
respond.
Okay, so we could just make our statement. Okay. So my next question would be: is this position an official position of the town of Ross? Do the council members support the statement that we need to request a variance to the no-rise provision in FEMA, which would flood my house? I hope you all consider this. If that is not your position, I'm requesting that the town council put in writing their position on this project that will flood my home, copying the Board of Supervisors and FEMA. I find it incomprehensible that a member of the town council would support something that is against the interests of the citizens of the town of Ross. To say that it's okay to flood my home in order to complete a project is reprehensible. And I think that member should resign. I have no stronger words I can use because we're in a public forum, but my disgust is at an all-time high. I would expect the council to consider this, and I look forward to hearing back from the council on this very important measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public in town hall who would like to offer a comment? Linda, are there any members of the public online who are raising their hand to make a public comment?
No, Mayor, there are no raised hands right now.
Thank you. Item 4 is the housing element update. Mr. Woltering and Mr. Hill.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. I'm going to introduce Andrew Hill, the town's consultant. On March 10th this year, the Ross Town Council authorized me to hire Diet and Bhatia, urban and regional planners based in Oakland, to work with the community to prepare its state-mandated housing element update. This is the state of California requires that every municipal jurisdiction update its housing element, which is part of its general plan, every 8 years. The housing element contains the policies and programs for a municipality to provide for its local housing needs and to satisfy state housing laws. Updating the element is a very complex process and involves considerable public involvement. Most municipalities, as did Ross, contract with consultants to assist with the preparation of these updates in order to receive certification by the state of California. This morning, I'm pleased to reintroduce Andrew Hill, principal with Diet and Bhatia, who is our primary contact with the firm, who will be giving an update on the work to date on the project. His update will focus primarily on public outreach efforts and related events at this early stage in the project. We expect the project to be completed by March of 2023. Mr. Hill.
Thank you and good morning. Sorry, Linda, is
You have to share the screen.
okay, but is my presentation up here too?
He has the budget.
Apologies. Okay, all right, there we go. I will do that. Everything is on time. All right. No problem. Apologies for the delay. Excuse me. Wasn't me, it's No, that's fine. Can we all see that? Yeah, great.
Maybe that would help, yeah.
Okay. I'm ready now. Apologies. So good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all again. I wanted to take a few minutes today just to let you know where we are with the project and where we're going next. And so I have a quick presentation to let you know what we've done over the last 4 weeks since we kicked off the project, and to give you a look ahead to the outreach activities that we have planned for the next 4 to 5 months. And then at the end, we can pause if you have any questions and answers. Any questions, I'm happy to take them. So since your last meeting, where I provided sort of an overview and an introduction to the housing element, we've accomplished a number of things. We've launched a dedicated page on the town's website with FAQs and a schedule, and that'll serve as the central portal of information on the project. We sent out a mailer to every address in Ross to let people know that the project is starting up. And on the back, there's a QR code or a number to call for more information. We've also collected a lot of data on environmental hazards and assembled sort of a base map to understand where the constraints are. And we're working now on reviewing census data to identify any special needs groups in the community, so seniors or disabled people. That's a requirement for the housing element as well. So with that sort of foundation laid, we're getting ready to gear up for community outreach. And the idea is that throughout the process, we'll program a series of public contact events to inform, engage, and solicit input from members of the community. One of the key objectives of the outreach is to raise awareness of the project, but also to collect input from Ross community members to make sure that the content of the plan is reflective of community values and priorities. So this is an overall snapshot of the outreach activities that we have planned. I'm going to walk through the particular events with you just to give you a preview of what's coming up. But the point I want to make here is that we have programmed regular check-ins with the council throughout. So before we go out to the community for a series of events, we want to give you a preview of what we're going to be doing with the community. And then after that, we'll come back to you to report out on results. So incrementally, we're keeping you in the loop. One of the initial strategies that we want to use is presentations to key stakeholder groups. The idea is to go out to these groups, meet them at their regular meetings, and let them know that about the project, the process, the legal requirements. So we're going to them to provide this information early on. I'm on the agenda for May 9th with RPOA. The Age-Friendly Task Force, I think they have a meeting coming up at the end of May, so I'll make a presentation to them as well. Of course, senior citizens are an important part of this process. I want to keep them in the loop. The ADR, I'm on their agenda for May 17th. And there was a suggestion of meeting with either the Ross Foundation, which I understand is a group of about 30 people, or perhaps the PTA, which might reach a wider audience. So we'll look to getting on an agenda to speak to those people as well. We're continuing on with the key informant interviews. Thank you all for your time last week. It was very helpful to hear your perspectives and continue to build an understanding of Ross. But we're also going to engage with RPOA in a similar type focus group type discussion. We'll be reaching out to major property owners. So this could be Branson School, it could be some downtown property owners, Magic Site, to get their input as well in a similar sort of small group discussion format. With town staff's help and Councilmember Breckus as well, we've assembled sort of a list of architects who have built or designed ADUs here in Ross or in Marin County, and we're organizing a focus group looking for probably next week to get their input on how, what were the challenges and opportunities, what went well, what could be improved, so we can take that input and build it into into the programs of the housing element. And then we'll also be looking to do a focus group with potential workforce housing residents. The state law requires that we make a diligent effort to reach out to people who may be living in lower income housing. So in Ross's case, that who would be living in the ADUs. And so the suggestion is maybe to reach out to staff at the town post office, staff at Branson and Ross schools, police and police officers, firemen, that kind of thing, to get their input and satisfy that legal requirement. So those are the groups that we have in mind for the key informant interviews. Another strategy we'll be using is an online community survey. The idea is that this would be sort of an interactive, short, engaging survey, but a great way to potentially get information about, gauge interest on building an ADU, and understand from people what would be an effective incentive to get them to build an ADU, because that's going to be an important part of the process. I think two of the marquee events are probably going to be open house meetings. We're planning 2 of these. The first one would be in June, and the objective of this one is to have different stations set up around the room that people can circulate to find out about the process, what is a housing element, what are the legal requirements, maybe to show a sites map and get some input. Each station would have a display board with information. Each station would be staffed by a member of the consultant team or town staff to answer questions. And there would be an opportunity for people to leave a comment or interact with a map, provide some input that way. At your next June meeting, the plan would be for me to come back again and give you more details on how we're planning to run that event, what some of the information would be, get some feedback before we actually design the boards and run the event. And then in July, we'd come back to you and report out on the survey and what we heard from the community at these meetings. And then the second open house meeting would be scheduled for September, and this would be to showcase the draft housing element to the community. Again, it would be structured with multiple stations around the room, display boards, each one of them staffed, but to showcase the key components of the housing element, and give the community members an opportunity to provide some feedback, so we refine it before we present it to you all, and then ultimately send it to HCD for review. Throughout the process, we're planning to do pop-up outreach, meet people, go to the people, meet them where they are in their daily life, to raise awareness before we release a survey or have an open house meeting, just to drive traffic to those tools. So we're thinking of May 25th, there's a disaster preparedness workshop on the Magic site. So we would go there, have a table, provide some information about the safety element, which is also part of this process. We're looking at maybe a pop-up event just at the town post office once the survey is on the street and before the June workshop, just a way to let people know about these events that are coming up and have a quick opportunity for some early feedback. And then similarly in August, probably at one of the Live on the Common events, we'd also be there to raise awareness about the next upcoming workshop. We could use something like live polling via smartphone to take a quick poll and show the results, something interactive, something fun, but to get some meaningful input, quick, short, might also raise awareness about the upcoming events. And then, so as I mentioned, we are planning to meet with you regularly, as I say, before a series of events and then after to report out. So in June, I'll be coming to give you an overview of open house number 1 and a preview of the survey before it launches, get your feedback so we can incorporate that. In July, come back to you and present the findings, what we heard from the survey, what we heard from the community at the workshop. And then similarly in August, we'd come to you with the plan for the second open house. And then in October, we'd present what we heard and walk you through the draft housing element, get your feedback before we send it to HCD. So that's an overall, this is just showing the sequence of the events that I've just run you through. And this will take us through the startup phase and the draft plan preparation phase. Once we have a draft housing element on the street, that's when the environmental review piece would gear up. So we're thinking that the second open house would be a great opportunity to have a station there where people can provide input on, after having heard about the plan, they can provide input on what potential environmental impacts they see and what solutions to those impacts might be appropriate. So that's kind of a brief look ahead to what we're planning in terms of outreach. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Are there questions? Councilmember McMillan.
I'm just wondering if the bulk of our work to address the housing element is through ADUs. Are we required to have a mechanism that those ADUs actually be rented to low, very low income people? And if not, is that something that we should consider to truly address the housing shortage?
That's a good question. So Marin County has done an ADU affordability study. So they looked at trends and likelihood, and they have sent that up to HCD for review. What typically happens, what happened in Southern California, for example, is the SCAG region did a similar survey. It was certified by HCD. That survey found that about 56% of the ADUs built were affordable for lower income classes. And so because the survey was certified by HCD, we can just assume that that percentage of ADUs will be affordable for lower income classes. So the Marin County survey, affordability survey, has not yet been certified by HCD, but we're anticipating it will be. And at that point, we'll be able to assume that a certain percentage of the ADUs linked to that survey will be affordable. So that means, that was a long answer to your question, but the answer is we can rely on that percentage to make an assumption about the number that will be affordable. We're anticipating that that number will be around 50%. And so we have that safe harbor to rely on. We don't need to do additional analysis to demonstrate the affordability. It may be advisable to also think about a mechanism, and what that mechanism might be is something we can present to the community either through a survey or at the workshops, get some feedback with your input as well, refine it before it actually goes into the housing element.
I'm hearing interest that certain members of the community would like some kind of a mechanism, either some kind of a tax credit or fee waiver, and working with the school in the town to facilitate workers at the schools and in town to be able to utilize those ADUs to really meet the spirit of the housing element goal.
Are there other questions? I have two. One is just to clarify, is there a requirement that the 111 units get built?
No, the requirement is that the zoning map have the capacity to allow for construction of those units. Actual construction of the units is, of course, driven by a lot of factors beyond the town's control, market factors, economics, and that kind of thing. So the requirement is simply that the town's zoning map have the capacity.
And then, thank you, I have one other question, which is, what sort of timetable are we looking at for when we have a map of Ross with 111 units penciled in? When, I think that's really what people want to see is, what are the sites we're suggesting? And I understand we'll be suggesting more than 111, but what's the timetable for showing that?
Yeah, and so I think that would be one of the stations at the June workshop.
Okay.
And
so soon?
Yes, pretty soon.
Okay. Councilmember Breckus.
As I mentioned to you when we met, I've had residents already come up to me and say, my house looks like a great property to subdivide. Can I do it? And, some of those people think they need to start with a land use attorney even. And I'm telling them to go to the town, that our planning staff should be able to answer a lot of these questions. But, you know, maybe some of these workshops are going to address that. But for people who are wanting to explore things like SB9 or ADUs, I mean, I'm assuming that's the right answer, right?
Yes, I think that is the right answer. The staff already has an SB9 checklist that it works with in terms of working with community members. And there have been some inquiries about lot splits using SB9. While Ross doesn't have a local SB9 ordinance yet, the state mandates if someone comes in and wants to process an SB9 lot split, that the town would do that in accordance with the state mandate and state guidelines. So we do have a checklist. We are prepared to meet with property owners in the community, whether it's an SB9 lot split or an ADU. And in the presentation later on, we'll talk a little bit about the ADU toolkit. So in addition, we'll be providing information through the toolkit to property owners about how they can process their ADUs. And we'll be working with the consultant on that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Is this a time I would take public input? Or? Sure. What our format is for this. Krista, is this the end of the presentation for this item?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I'm not planning on doing anything else right now.
So then let's just see if any members of the public would want to comment. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. I don't see any members of the public in town hall. Are there any members of the public online who would like to offer a comment?
There are no raised hands, Mayor.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the update. We appreciate your coming today. The next item, number 5, is a general discussion regarding Ross Valley Fire Department's draft request for proposals for a study to develop policy options for the board surrounding future leadership and governance. There have been some changes with the governance. Town Manager Johnson.
Thank you. This item was put on the agenda at the request of Councilmember Breckus. I included the information that was provided to the Ross Valley Fire Department Board at their last meeting, I recall was April 13th. It's in your agenda packet describing how with a cover agenda report from Fire Chief Jason Weber, where he is indicating a desire to go out with a request for proposal for a consultant to provide do an evaluation of some options for governance of the organization. So there wasn't a lot of information in the agenda report. Chief Weber did provide a presentation to the board at the meeting. He was not available to be here today, and this was put on the agenda as a discussion item. So
I have one topic to discuss, and that is there an option of keeping Chief Weber? I mean, will the county reconsider and can renew that contract that expires in 1 year?
That question was raised at the board meeting, and my understanding was that there absolutely is no likelihood of continuing the present arrangement.
Councilmember Breckus, are there ways that we should be acting as a council to try to, help out with this leadership decision, or do we wait to see what the, what comes of the request for proposals? Like, where do things stand for us as a council? What do you suggest?
I'm not really sure. I think it's just important enough for us to know about it. It may be one of those things that we want to agendize it just regularly, because it could be one of those things where we get new information. We usually meet the night before. So we get new information, and then, if it's not agendized, we can't really talk about it. But like a couple things that I thought were kind of interesting was, number one, Chief Weber thought that there would be this savings of time that would warrant the price that the county was paid for the services. And there would be this overall benefit to both groups, because with the extra money, the county was able to hire somebody to take some administrative work off Chief Weber. And then that person could kind of play a dual role with us. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The consolidation of services wasn't the time savings that he expected. And so that's one of the reasons. We did have, I think it was asked about whether it was possible. There's some very competent people that regularly are at our meeting below Chief Weber. And I think there was some question about whether there could be a continuation of that. And I don't know that we got a totally clear answer on that. Do you recall that, Beach?
My impression was that he was saying that any arrangement that involved employing some other member of the county staff was not, he didn't want to consider. That doesn't mean we don't want to, we, the board, don't want to consider it.
So I think the names I heard were Central Marin Fire as a possible entity that could be looked at for outsourcing. And then, you know, there could be some other things that could come of it. So essentially, you know, the county's arrangement was very different. It wasn't consolidation. It was simply outsourcing the chief position. And the RFP, one of the things that you have to know is that it is asking to scope a consolidation separate from just what we've done before. We've been told that, and correct me if you have a different recollection, Beach, but we were told that consolidation is a 6 to 7 year process typically. And so, you know, this would be scoped, but it's not something that creates a solution for our short-term timeframe. You know, I was a little disappointed that we made the decision to close the fire station without information that this was going to happen, because I have a feeling that it was known. And so that was a frustration point for me when I found this out, because I think it really logically needed to be a part of that discussion for us. And so, you know, we're making these two decisions. We made one decision, and now we're making this other decision, and they're not divorced. They're really related. And, you know, I'll probably continue to state that. And, you know, I don't know what we want to do with that, but I think it's important enough that we should probably continue to put it on our agenda so that when the next conversation occurs, and we really didn't get any feedback from board members about this, but the next conversation that occurs, we'll at least be able to report in more than just a report item.
That seems like a good idea, since the fire board meets one day before we meet, right? And we need 72 hours for our agenda. So we'll just replace the COVID with the Valley Fire Department. Go ahead.
Is there a sort of a deadline now, a drop dead date, where this will all be taken care of by that date? Because after that, we need our own.
I think it's August of 2023 when our arrangement with the county runs out.
In terms of finding a new arrangement, are we contemplating, or is the Powers Authority thinking of any consultant to figure this out? Or
Yeah, that's
even
what
to
the
recruit people? Is that the next step?
the RFP is to employ somebody to do that.
Thank you.
Councilmember McMillan.
So maybe I misread or misheard, but I thought Canfield Fire was also a potential. Is that correct?
There's a whole lot of potentials.
Okay.
I mean, there was some discussion in very general terms about forming some new organization that included more than just the 4 entities that now comprise the RVFD.
And are there any employees at the Ross Valley Fire District who might be eligible to elevated to be the chief?
That wasn't discussed. I mean, that wasn't discussed. It wasn't something that we found to be the case the last time we looked.
And I really don't think there are, just because we employed county people to provide us the administrative portion of our organization. So they're basically county folks.
So no one was being groomed or anything internally?
If any grooming has gone on, I don't know about it.
I would agree that this needs to be on the agenda just as a standing item. This is a big issue. And I too, Elizabeth, am really disappointed in the timing. That seems really bad.
It really came as a big surprise to us to get this thing as an agenda item on the last meeting of the board.
Yeah, the two issues are totally related. And to do one without information about the other, it almost seems like does the first need to be redone?
I totally share that concern. I mean, I think that we need to see where this is going, and you know, it's important for us to not. I mean, you know, it's when the county situation worked well for us. For example, the Kentfield option, that's a special district with a bunch of Kent Woodlands and Kentfield residents who I'm sure do an excellent job, but everything's different and we would have no say. We would, you know, so you could see how there could be scenarios where it's not just our voice would be diluted. We would not have a voice except for every, whatever it would be, 3 to 4 years when we come up to contract to renew. And that's really not what we signed up for.
One of the things that's been talked about, and at least one of the leaders of the firefighters themselves is to change our form of government to a fire district instead of a fire department. And I can't, don't ask me what the difference is because I don't know, but it's significant. And there is, I mean, that's one of the things that's been mentioned that we ought to be considering.
I wonder if you, Krista, have any, could you explain the different tax issues and the funding that applies for the two scenarios?
Sure. So thank you. So it's my understanding that a standalone district would require, and that's something that I know that the LAFCO executive director mentioned to me when I had my orientation meeting with him a few months ago, and it would require our property tax. The property tax pie, our slice of the pie that we get from property tax is the amount that it is the size that it is based in part because the town provides fire service. So if a standalone district starts providing fire service, then that slice of the pie will need to be adjusted to reflect that Ross is no longer providing fire service. The responsibility for it, the funding for it, would be a standalone district, which would have its own elected representatives and its own management, and therefore would need its funding source. So you would be taking a chunk of, I mean, the fire contract is our #1 expense here in Ross. So that's just a real basic level of my understanding of what it would mean, and it would really be you know, how that negotiation of how that slice of the pie is decreased would be a very serious endeavor for the town.
And we'd be forming a separate governmental entity.
Mm-hmm. So it would have to go through a whole LAFCO process and be multi-year process.
Don't residents have to vote to form that special district?
I'm not positive on it, but it sounds like it would be. I mean, they have to vote for the, they'd have to definitely vote for their new representatives to represent them on that district. So I can certainly bring back information. I mean, that's part of the reason for this. So in the chief's very brief staff report to the fire board, he said that the department is seeking options for the succession of the MOU, which could include multiple scenarios that require research and ultimately policy options to present it to the fire board. Therefore, the fire department proposes a phased approach to gather information, compile, and then narrow the options with the board. And they viewed it as a process similar to what happened with the significant policy decision last year about the Ross Fire Station, where there were a lot of options that were narrowed down, and then that's how he envisions the process going, and he wants to get it started. So at the next fire board meeting, the board will consider, the board has not approved the publication of the request for proposals document. One of the things that the board directed was that the Sleepy Hollow representative would be able to look at the RFP and add. So we had the town managers of the entities, we met on Wednesday, yesterday morning, and the Sleepy Hollow representative joined our call halfway through. And we talked about that issue, and then he was provided with draft RFP to take a look at it, and he promised to provide information back by the end of this week, because Chief Weber needs to get the agenda item ready to go to the board at the next meeting.
I assume the paying for the RFP would be based on the same allocation that we just agreed to. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be it's coming out of the budget for the, yeah.
Okay. And if we become this big district, then that has implications for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority representation too. And it would mean that Sleepy Hollow, Fairfax, and Thelma and Ross would no longer be on that board. It would be a representative from that overall group. So that's something to just keep in the back of your, the back of your head.
Can I just
Yes.
follow up? You know, I don't think that you need to provide the special district forming information to us specifically. It just seems to me that it should be part of Jason's report.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I don't need I mean, you could just put a couple paragraphs to just give us an overview of that instead of,
Oh, so
you
you
know.
want that for your board meeting?
I mean, I think that the last discussion, in addition to having the issue of the RFP not being given to us in advance of the meeting, I think the other issue is we're not really getting, I mean, we need to understand what we're exploring. And, you know, being told that there's a special district forming when we don't even know what that entails, to me, you know, why hire a consultant group to spend, you know, 20 hours on a process that doesn't make sense? We don't even know what the process is. So I would find that useful if you can ask him to get that information.
Yes, I will.
And then we could just all read it instead.
My understanding is, though, that the RFP is just to hire a consultant to explore these options and to make some recommendation about what makes sense. So I would think we'd get information regarding forming a district as part of what we got from the consultant that we're proposing to hire, or that they're proposing to hire to help with this process.
Are there any other comments or suggestions? Well, let's move on to the budget, which will be more satisfying. So this is item number 6, budget presentation and discussion of the draft Town of Ross budget for fiscal year 2023. Town Manager Johnson.
Just give me just a few moments to set up my tech.
Sure.
I need to share screen.
In Zoom first, and then share screen in Zoom.
I'm in Zoom.
And go to share screen.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So we're in Zoom, right? Town clerk? Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. All right. Mayor and council members, I'd like to thank you for setting aside time today for this annual budget workshop. And I'd also like to introduce members of our team who are participating today. We have our consulting accountant, Liz Ford, here, our town clerk, Linda Lopez, Public Works Director, Rich Simonich, Police Chief, Ralph Pata, Interim Planning and Building Director, David Woltering, and our Recreation Manager, Gretchen Kastitz. So thank you. We've put a lot of work into this, as I know the council has put a lot of work into it, and we will start moving forward here. Okay, so this is a presentation about our draft budget that we've provided to you in your agenda binder. I also did make copies of this PowerPoint presentation for you in case you have any trouble seeing the screen since there's so much light in the room. This is for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. Just as a reminder, the town council reviewed its town goals last month during your strategic planning session, and they have guided staff's development of the draft fiscal year 23 budget before you this morning. So I won't go through them now. I know that you know them by heart, but I wanted to remind you about them, and they are up on the wall. Okay, so our budget schedule, we held, as I mentioned, we held the March 15th strategic workshop with the council. And during that, we reviewed the town goals. The council celebrated recent accomplishments that were made, town council inspired, or things that the town council acted upon throughout the year. We reviewed elements of the organizational capacity. We reviewed the 5-year financial forecast, the draft 5-year capital improvement plan, and discussed draft priority items for the fiscal year ending 23 budget. So today we have our public workshop, and then on June 16th, we will return to the council for the hearing for the actual budget adoptions and the related resolutions that are required. Let's see. I like this slide. This slide was part of your slide presentation at your March 15th meeting. And we've updated it with some of the changes that have occurred just in this last month as we were refining the draft budget. It's really simple, yet I believe informative. It shows that the bottom line is this, the main message, the takeaway from this is it shows that the current level of services are fundable over the next 5 years. At the end of this year, June, we project a $478,000 surplus. And so in just a month, we should know for sure if we have this amount of money as a surplus. And you might ask, wow, that's a good chunk of money. What is it resulting from? And it's resulting from primarily from the increase in property taxes that the town received over this past year that is well above what we had budgeted for. It also is resulting from a significant increase in Recreation Department revenue. And the change there is that usually when we have an increase in revenue in recreation, there's a resulting increase expenditures. But Gretchen and her team have really done without this. They've been able to increase revenue so much in this past year without staffing up. Now, we are going to be staffing up this coming year. We need to, but in the meantime, it did generate quite a part of our surplus. So those are the primary reasons that you're seeing that projected $478,000 surplus. Yes.
Does that surplus amount reflect the American Rescue funds that we are getting? That what is called, you know, the
No,
federal
because no, that and you're gonna see me looking a lot at Liz. She's gonna be helping me a lot. It does not, because that was put into the facilities fund. Liz, is there anything you need to add? Okay.
Can I ask a question? Can you tell us what page in our binder we might be referencing as we're going through? And then I had another question about that amount, which was, do you have any way to tell us what amount, and I don't need an exact dollar, but what amount is property taxes versus rec? Just so we can ballpark idea. Maybe there's somewhere I'm supposed to look for that, but I'm not sure where we would be.
Gretchen is.
You can find the 478,000 on page 9. It's the estimated actual.
In
Tab F.
Oh, F.
So the estimated actual column for fiscal year ending 22, if you go towards the bottom, you'll see that 478,000. So
The third line from the bottom, net change in fund balance. Is that correct, Liz?
And then,
and then the 1417 is the next column over. So that's
so then is there a way to look at these numbers? Do you look at recreation estimated versus actual and say, looks like rec made about over 100,000 more?
So the budget for fiscal year ending 22 for recreation revenue is 509,000, but we are projecting the actual at June 30th will be almost $678,000.
Where do you see that?
And that's up in on the same page 9. If you go up above, it says it's revenue, and it starts off with property tax, and recreation is towards the bottom. So it shows, if you look at the middle column, the third column is what we budgeted for the current fiscal year ending 22. We budgeted 5.18 in property taxes, but we're projecting that we're going to receive 5.369 in property taxes. And so it does that for each revenue source. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about that? Yes, Mr.
Question, the revenues from the American Rescue Plan, are they reflected here on page 9 as well? Is that intergovernmental revenues?
fund,
right.
which is tab.
Right, so this page 9 is the operating fund, so it's under the facilities fund.
Tab O.
So on page 23 of the draft budget under tab O in your binder, you'll see it's the Facilities and Equipment Fund. Up at the top, you'll see the different sources of revenue that go into that fund. The second line is the ARPA, America Rescue Plan, 575,000 in the current fiscal year.
That's not accounted for then as an operating type revenue or expense.
Well, we put it into the straight into the facilities fund, and then the council has the ability to direct that
We're
budget.
going to be presenting a staff report at the May council meeting discussing the American Rescue Plan, spending plan. So there may be a change, but the net result is that the funds are going to end up in the facilities fund.
Yeah. There's some, the program is new and the federal government has been putting out different, reporting requirements and guidelines and reporting. So we are watching it closely to make sure we're doing everything exactly right, crossing all our T's. And so we are planning to bring back an item at your next council meeting to discuss it with the council, because we might need to move it between funds just to make sure that the reporting is absolutely in line with what the federal government requires. Okay.
So that's not a restricted fund. The Facilities and Equipment Fund is not a restricted fund. We can move the money. Okay, thank you.
Okay, where was I? Let's see. I think, we're still on the financial forecast slide. So we talked about the projected surplus, and then, so in this is a 5-year forecast. And so the first 2 columns are the projected at year end, this coming June. And then the second column includes the whole budget, the whole draft budget that we're presenting to you today, fiscal year ending 23. And then what we did for the subsequent years is we just increased revenues and expenditures by 3.5%. We didn't go down there into every single line item. So this is just to give you an idea that that based on the current level of services, it is fundable over these next 5 years, leaving us with surpluses each year, small surpluses, but still there. Okay. This next slide just talks briefly, reminder to the council about the funds. So if you see on the top there, the general fund consists of 3 separate funds: the operating fund, which we just went through on page 9, the facilities and equipment fund, and we also have an emergency fund that has $1.5 million in it. And then we have a set of special revenue funds, and these funds, such as gas tax, drainage, etc., they can only be spent, the funds in those can only be spent on specific purposes. Okay, this is the good news. This is the good news slide. So what this slide shows you is it's a year-over-year budget comparison. So the main message here is that revenues in fiscal year 23 continue to grow and recover from the effects of the pandemic. So for example, the top line, property taxes have increased. We are projecting them to increase 9.7% from budgeted for fiscal year 23 as compared to what was budgeted in fiscal year 22. So that's a nice increase. These property taxes are, we get a number from the county assessor, and then we also have a consultant, HDL, that gives us a number too. So we feel confident that these numbers, this is conservative, but we feel confident that it is 9.7% expected increase. The second line is other taxes. And these are our real estate transfer tax revenue, sales tax revenue, business license revenue. Those are examples of other taxes. We expect to increase that, that source of revenue by 3.2%. Intergovernment, you'll see, we're expecting that to increase by 34.5%. Not as good news because it's really an accounting function. That reflects the COPS grant. This is the grant we get from the federal government, and it pretty much pays for one police officer. We had a separate fund set up called the COPS fund, but our auditor has advised us to move it back into the operating fund. Am I saying that right, Liz?
Not the auditor,
The accountant. Pardon me.
it's not required to have a separate fund, and the separate fund causes accounting extra work. And it would also be nice to have, we've been moving police expenditures for that 169,000 out of the police department and over to COPS fund. If we keep it in the operating fund, then all the police expenses are going to be in the same place. So that would be beneficial too.
Thank you, Liz. It's more transparent because so now the police department budget really shows what they're spending. But one of the results is it makes our intergovernmental revenue increase by 34%. So, okay, that's why. Let's see. Our recreation revenue is increasing. It's at 609,000 we projecting for the coming year. However, that is still not what it was back in fiscal year 19, which was pre-pandemic, when it was at $860,000. Okay. So the next slide is just about the general fund, and it shows the expense change between our current fiscal year budget 22 and the draft budget that's before you. So it's an overview of expenditures by department, and we're going to be giving you lots more detail and explanation in our coming slides. Just wanted to let you know that we do look at this, and there is a couple significant increases, and we will be explaining that to the council. Okay. Okay, so this slide shows our operating fund balance. It's the main message here is that it's showing that the operating fund balance has really stabilized over these last years. The dip in fiscal year 21, which is the third bar from the right, that dip reflects a large transfer that was made out of the operating fund into the facilities fund at that time. And that's one of the reasons why your facilities fund has a nice a healthy balance of $7 million. So that explains that little dip in fiscal year 21 in this slide. For the fiscal year 23 budget, which is the last bar, the estimated fund balance is 4.6 million. And that estimated fund balance really exceeds what is the council's policy for required reserve fund balance. That amount, what is required by the council adopted policy, is 2.9 million. And so at the end of fiscal year 23, we're still projecting you're going to have 4.6. So that's good news. In addition to this operating reserve, the town also has that 1.5 million emergency fund and the 7 million in the facilities fund. And that exists due to the council's prudent leadership over these past years to generate that savings.
Is there 7 million in the facilities fund right now? I thought we were projecting that when we were able to do the construction project, we would have 7 million available.
estimating at June 30th of '22 that you're going to have 7 million.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Right.
So in '21, when a significant, I believe it was about $1 million that was transferred into the facilities fund. And then the next year it was, I think, 550,000. And this year it's in the budget for fiscal year '22. And we also have a transfer to the facilities fund in the budget, the draft budget before you, of 500,000. Okay. So this next slide, it displays the revenue sources that make up the town's general fund. As you can see, the big red one, property taxes are the town's largest source of revenue at 59% of the general fund. And then our second biggest source of revenue at 10% is the public safety tax. And so even though it is 10% of the general fund, that amount covers 20% of the town's public safety costs, police and fire. So it's a significant chunk of money, but it's covering just 20% of the town's total costs for public safety. This slide talks about expenditures, and it shows that the majority of the town's general fund expenditures are for labor. The red is the Ross Valley Fire Department expenses at 25% of our general fund expenses. And the blue is all the rest of our wages. So blue is not just police, it's all the rest of our town staff. And then so that's already just about 50%. But then if we add in our expenses for outside services, which is the green, and that covers legal services, accounting, plan check, recreation instructors, etc. That outside services, that grows to 70%. So a good 70% of the town's budget is devoted to labor, which is definitely in line with what most cities spend. We are a service organization. This next slide is expenditures by department. And as I mentioned earlier, our fire department is the largest expense. And this is the slide that shows that 50% of the town's expenditures are for public safety. So between the red for fire and blue for police. I would like to note that the police officer memorandum of understanding, our labor agreement, expires this June 30th, and a new one is currently being negotiated. The budget may need to be adjusted upon completion of that negotiation and the town council's approval of that of the resulting revised MOU. And then the same process is underway right now for our Ross Valley Fire Department's labor, several of their labor groups. And that could also result in a adjusted amount of money that the town has to pay Ross Valley Fire Department. So hopefully those two numbers will be finalized before we bring the budget back to you on June 16th, but it's a matter of the negotiation process. This next slide shows staffing full-time equivalents, which we call FTEs. The dip in fiscal year ending '21 is due to the shutdown of most of the recreation programming due to the pandemic. Then the next year in '22, you see that our recreation staffing increased a bit. And then we are asking for it to increase again in the budget that's before you this morning as our recreation programming returns. The graph also reflects in fiscal year ending '23 the addition of an analyst position, which I will describe in a few minutes. Okay. So this is our accountant's favorite slide. What's the bottom line? and it's the change in the fund balance. So the takeaway message from this slide is that, good news, the general fund budget is balanced in fiscal year ending 23, and the budget that's before you. And that includes small increases in the general fund related fund balances, operating fund, facilities, and the emergency fund. The second column on this chart here shows, so the first one shows the change. The second one shows, well, what is the balance? So we want to make sure that you can see here about these balances that will exist at the end of fiscal year 23 in these funds. And so for the general, those three general fund, you have 13.2, almost $13.3 million in your fund balances at the end of fiscal year 23. Then the bottom half of the chart shows the special revenue funds. There is a net change to the fund balance in the roadway fund balance of 82,000, and in the drainage fund, which is 497,000. That one, you might recall, it's largely due to the advance that the drainage fund is making for the Winship Bridge project. So this is the one that we took to you a few months ago, and we expect to be receiving reimbursement from the federal government. So nonetheless, the special funds will also have a fund balance of 1.7 million at the end of fiscal year 23. The next couple of slides, I just wanted to point out that the message here is we're going to be busy in the coming year. We've got a variety of new and a continuation of priority projects and programs. And I just wanted to note on this slide and the next that this is just a preview. In the slides where each department manager is going to go through, they'll cover some more of these projects in more detail. So, you know, we've got the housing element, the facilities master plan that we're kicking off, the storm drainage master plan is continuing. One of the things that's included in the budget is additional services for cybersecurity protection. We have a small item, but it's important. It's the development of an urban forestry management plan, and Rich Simonich will talk more about that in his slide. We are continuing to process the undergrounding utility districts. We're going to be doing an update to the climate action plan, adopting a new building code that needs to be done every 3 years. So that'll be brought to you this late fall, winter. Accessory dwelling unit toolkit that David Woltering mentioned. New for us is we will be having a review of Branson School's annual traffic report. So we have a little bit of the money in the budget for a traffic consultant, and that will be reimbursed by Branson School. And then we have the implementation of the Senate Bill 1383 organics recycling, all a menu of mandated programs and reporting. We are going to continue the implementation of emergency preparedness policies and practice. This is not, the first 3 items are not new. I did add on improving resident preparedness and response to emergencies through just the work that Gretchen is doing with the Age Friendly Task Force on their event at Magic in a couple of weeks, and working with the new disaster preparedness coordinator the Ross Valley Fire Department has, and the emphasis on that, of course, of Marin wildfire. So there's lots of opportunity to help our residents to be better prepared for disasters, and also to be able to respond when there is a disaster and help themselves and help their neighbors. So there's a lot of coordinating, and so that's a focus for the coming year. Post-COVID, expanding the recreation programs, restarting the July 4th event, and continuing age-friendly activities. Supporting the Ross Property Owner Association events, objective design standards, vehicle miles traveled ordinance, Senate Bill 9 ordinance, and the addition of an analyst position, which I'll talk more about. This is the preview. We also have some new, some capital projects in the coming year to continue on the Laurel Grove pedestrian pathway. Design and start of construction will be happening in the upcoming year. Fern Hill Avenue paving and pedestrian pathway, the design. We want to get this project what's called shovel ready so that it will be competitive for either TAM grant and or an earmark by our state assembly or state senate representatives if the state continues to have healthy budget surpluses. So we want to get this ready to go so that when a funding source or an opportunity comes up, we can say, here, we have this great project, please provide funding for it. And the council also was interested in asking Branson to contribute some funding. So that we'll work on is getting this one set up this coming year. Implementing the Roscommon Landscape Master Plan that the council approved this past year, continuing to work on Winship Bridge, the town hall parking repair and the station little project that you all talked about for a while at your last meeting, and then drainage improvements on Bolinas and Sir Francis Drake. General themes for expenditures. So this slide points out these expenditure themes that are carried out through the various departmental budgets. And so I just kind of wanted to hit them all in one place. We had to put some money in the budget to improve our cybersecurity. We've received a proposal from Marin IT, which is the company that handles our IT. And of course, you know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So it's going to cost us more, double is their proposal to provide cybersecurity that the county has just put together a list of 10 cybersecurity, the top 10 priority things that we should do, which is very helpful. But so I asked Marin IT, well, can you help us do this and how much it will cost? And we got a proposal that pretty much doubles what they charge us now. I need to spend some time reviewing it, comparing it to what, you know, making sure that we get a good rate. And then the Marin IT contract has not come to council, so I'll be bringing that to council when I put that all together. So right now there's a placeholder in the budget, but this is something that you're going to see in the departmental budgets that we really need to be spending time and some money on. Another is a focus on pedestrian safety. Education, enforcement, and engineering are usually called the 3 E's. And so, for example, for education, you know, we are one of the things that I would like an analyst to do, or us to do, is to work a little bit on our website, and we can utilize our website to help educate the community about pedestrian safety. That's just one part of it. And then, of course, Rich Simonich has some items in the Public Works Department to be continuing to look at this issue because, you know, we have heard from the council and the community about this. Another theme for expenditures is employee retention and recruitment. So we have an employee training is tied to it. So you're going to see in each departmental budget, there is an increase in the training budget. I still think it's very modest, but we need to be able to keep our employees and attract new ones. We have to provide them with some level of training, professional development. Part of this theme is also, I have put in the budget a cost of living increase for all of our employees that are not under contract of 3.8%, which is the amount that we increased our fees by in January, and is still below what we're seeing the cost of living increase. The CPI increase, we're not going to be able to increase it as much as CPI, but it's important if we want to keep, you know, in the middle of the pack to keep our employees and attract them to pay them a fair wage. Computers, we need to be able to enable remote work as appropriate. We need to try to have more ergonomic workstations and just kind of slowly improve. These are things that employees are looking for when they come, and if they want to stay, that we care about their health. We want them to have a good place to work. So those are just some examples of what is kind of driving some of the increase in the departments. So the technical tools. So another theme, complying with new state mandates. I mean, we always have to comply with mandates, but there just seem to be a lot of recent ones that are very complicated and have a lot of consequences. So of course, you've heard all about the housing element consequences but SB 9. And I'm just learning more and more about Senate Bill 1383, which is the organics recycling, and what we are required, even as a very small town, we are required to do, and the level of reporting and the programs and procurement that we have to have in place. So those are all mandated by the state of California. We also have our insurance costs are increasing by $113,000 in the coming year. That cost is allocated to each department, so you'll see that. And then the employer's share of PERS is increasing in part due to required unfunded pension liability contributions. Now, we've made a lot of progress in paying down the unfunded liability, which is excellent, but we're still charged, and that is going up. The cost of PERS continues to go up, and that's a theme you'll see. So this part of the presentation, we're going to go through each department, and I'm going to take the first one, which is general government, and we just have 1 or 2 slides, don't worry, for each department. And we're just highlighting things that might be of interest to you, or things that have significant increases or decreases that we want to point out. So I'm going to handle the general government, and then we'll have the rest of our team here talk about their own department budgets. Okay. So for general government, the budget is up 32.5% from the previous budget, and wages and benefits are 43% higher than the prior year. And so this is primarily because of the addition of a full-time analyst position that I am recommending. And just briefly, I also want to note that the wages for general government also include the amount of money that we pay the town treasurer. The town treasurer position earns $3,000 a year, so that's included in this general government expenditure budget. So I just wanted to point that out. So I wanted to just talk with you a little bit about the analyst position. So we have, and in here I have some examples of it, but this is an analyst position is a common generalist position. It's a college graduate who has excellent writing skills, who is resourceful, meaning they can call other cities and help find out information. And it's a really what I've found since I've been here, and I've been here since November, is yes, we have a small staff, but we also have our department teams are doing things that the town is paying a department head level person to do a lot of our jobs are things that much lower paid people could handle very well. And so I'm going to use, and sorry to put Rich on the spot, but we have a public works director who is, corresponding with the charging station about different charging rates, and he's a highly skilled engineer with decades of experience, and I need him to be moving our capital projects forward. And so I want to free up some of the time that he's spending on those things, or on our Trackit system, which is our permit tracking. He handles all of the interaction with the company. They don't need an engineer to do that. And for myself, I'm handling the garbage and recycling, and I'm I've done that in the past, except now under Senate Bill 1383, one of the things that's required is to make sure that our residents are complying with mandatory recycling, and it requires a lot of reporting. And I'm not sure that it's probably not the best use of the money that the town is paying me to be out there, opening lids on the thing. But I would do it if I need to. But the amount of time I'm spending doing reporting, attending meetings, I really enjoy the regional nature of Marin County and how we have all these small cities and we work together and we have a lot of JPAs. The challenge for us here is, though, that we have to be represented on all those meetings. And I am, and my colleagues are representing, I spend a lot of time representing the town on meetings, when if I had somebody who represented the town well, and could report back to me where I wasn't having to sit through a 2-hour meeting, that would be a big help to me to be able to then turn my attention on things that require a higher, different, more experienced skill level. That's kind of the reason for an analyst, a generalist position like that. But some of the more specific things, and it's what's great about them is that they're a generalist, they're a utility player. So as things change, we can pull that person in and redirect them to something that becomes a priority. But for the coming year, some things that additionally come to mind is, yes, the Senate Bill 1383 items. And then moving forward, the council's priorities in the areas of environmental stewardship, disaster preparedness, and community outreach. So in regards to disaster preparedness, there are a lot of things that it's so fantastic that Ross Valley Fire Department now has this disaster preparedness coordinator. And she seems, I've met with her, she seems fantastic. However, they're coordinating what the different towns are doing. And we need to have somebody here that is working with our community groups, and if we're only depending on Ross Valley Fire to do it, it's not going to happen right away. It's going to take a while, and we're not going to get that local service that we need. And so right now I'm depending on Chief Pata to handle some of this, to work with Ross Reddy, and he's also down police officers and out there today patrolling when he's not here. Oh, you're here right now. Great, thank you. So that's another example of how we have a department head who is handling some mailings and things like that. So risk management is an area that I would see this person as spending time on, not just representing the town on its 2 risk management JPAs, but working on workplace safety, working with our attorney on contracts, getting us up performing at a higher level when it comes to managing risk, because it will help us. It'll help us in the long run to be able to have better contract language and better practices. So some HR research and policies, I think, Linda does a lot of transactional things in this area, but I believe she would agree that we do need some assistance when it comes to things researching. We don't want to always have to pay our employment attorney to do things that we might be able to do ourselves for a lot less money. Sorry to the attorneys that are on the council. Yeah. Okay. Good. Website improvements, I mentioned that. Another area is preparing grant applications and the required reporting. We have a multitude of zero waste Marin grants, and they have new grant opportunities that are supposed to be helping us with 1383, but we have to apply for them and do the reporting. Cal Recycle, Prop 68, that was the park bond. TAM measure, AA, I think there's another one called Senate SB1. And I mentioned before applying for earmarks. So as we have, if we identify projects, there's opportunities to get them funded, but we have to educate our state and federal representatives about what our needs are and provide them with nice information about our, and get our, have the mayor come with us and to try to get this money, because there are earmarks available. Outreach and management assistance for the facilities master plan and its implementation as that starts building steam. So those are some examples of what I see this position working on. There is $100,000 in the budget between that salary and benefits. Is that correct, Liz? Yeah. So it was based on a recent recruitment that the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority just did a recruitment for a very similar type position. So I based it on that. Do you have any questions about that? Yes.
Well, I do have a couple questions. Number one, there has been talk periodically, not just by you, in fact, I'm not even sure by you, but certainly by predecessors in your position, that maybe at some point we would need a finance assistant, like a finance position. And so one of the questions I have is, is that still a continuing potential need that, this year we'll hire someone in the management analyst position, and then next year we'll be looking to add another staff person who's pretty senior, or not, I don't know how you would call that, but someone in that position. That's one question. Then the other question is, how come you're calling that person a management analyst instead of, for example, an assistant to the town manager? Or it seems like it could be a number of different positions, and I'm just wondering how the choice got made, or how you see that as somewhat different.
Well, I was an assistant to the city manager in Alameda for almost 9 years. It's usually higher paid than an analyst position. So usually there's usually like analyst, administrative analyst, senior analyst, assistant to the city manager is usually the highest end of an analyst position. So it was the way that so it could be assistant to the city manager. That would be good. It's also, we're so small. Number one, I was sensitive to the idea of building my empire, right? Assistant to the city manager. But also, I really view this person as being a utility player. This person will report to me, but there are so right now I really see that there are the public works related items that could really use some assistance. So analyst to me is just a utility player. It's like and I'm trying to keep the cost down. This is not a position that usually if we were a larger organization, it's like an entry level position, but it's somebody that has a college degree, that's interested in local government as a career, that has the analyst. It needs to be a good writer. And now it needs to be somebody that is good with Excel and good with websites and all the PowerPoint and all those kinds of things. But I was trying to keep the cost down and start off because this position, it's my understanding, hasn't existed here, or at least not for many years. So kind of start off in a modest fashion. And oftentimes there will be turnover in this position. Somebody will come usually and do this kind of a position for hopefully 3-4 years, and then they will likely want to get promoted. And as a small organization, it's hard to keep people that, we don't have a lot of places for people to go. So, and so then it can be reevaluated. If you started off higher, then you might get somebody that will want to stay a really long time, and you might not have as much. So I thought this would give us the maximum flexibility. So that's the analyst part of it. But when you brought up the finance, so first of all, right now I am it would be such a luxury to have a 100% finance person. But I feel like right now we have a great accountant. We have a great, Linda does a great job with all of her finance transactional things that she's doing. And Linda has announced her retirement at the end of the year. So I will be looking at, workload. I know that Liz probably doesn't want to work forever. Correct. Yeah. And so there will be an opportunity between, those Liz and Linda to look at the finance part of it. But I think where I might need, Liz and I were just talking about this yesterday, we might need pretty soon Joe left us in a really good shape, especially for these, he did the financial policies, brought them to the council last year. He did so much work on PERS and stuff like that, but I'm getting questions from council members about PERS, and if I'm not able to answer them, I'm just not going to throw it out there if I don't know. And if Liz doesn't know, we might need to get a consultant to give us some advice in the area of PERS. And is it better to pay down PERS or pay into facilities, that kind, but it doesn't need to be a full-time position. Full-time finance position is going to be expensive for us, and it's going to be, and it's really hard to recruit. It was hard to recruit for finance directors before this whole COVID horrible employee recruitment period started. So I guess that's a long wandering answer to your question. I'm sorry. But I'm feeling, I don't want to add a highly paid finance director at this time, not while we still have our team working here with an opportunity to use consultants as we need them.
Yeah, sometimes I just wonder if, we're in this situation where you're trying to, stretch yourself to go to all these meetings or implement an organics program. So is Belvedere. I sometimes wonder if we can't look at sharing a position between our town and another really small town that's so comparable to us for some kind of savings, whether it be finance or this analyst position. At least all the overlap that there is, that's always been my confusion is, can't we do something there that would be helpful? But thank you for the answer.
That was going to be my comment too, in terms of the finance person, that there may be some opportunity to share with some of the smaller jurisdictions who don't need a full finance person.
That's sort of what a consultant is in some ways, isn't it? The consultant works for several towns, but right, we wouldn't maybe don't need a full-time. And I think we all understand that it's very expensive and it's very hard to find a good person.
I also just don't want to get into the position of hiring a highly paid finance person and then underusing them, because I really need somebody to do this and this, not necessarily a finance director. I don't just want a body, I want it to be appropriate to the work that I think needs to be done now. But Councilmember Kircher, I think, is impatient.
I just wanted to comment that I think this could be really, really helpful with disaster preparedness. I worked a little on that before becoming a council member, and both the workload as a council member plus COVID sort of derailed a lot of what was ongoing then. But I hope we can resume it, creating a really robust block captain program. And we rely completely on volunteers for a lot of that. And everybody is great and they work hard, but they have other things going on. So if somebody could kind of keep that going and coordinate it, I think that would be fantastic.
Councilmember Cool.
We all have various ideas about ways that we could improve our staffing and how we do things. But it's my observation that the person who best understands that is our town manager. And so I'm very much inclined as we go along to accept her judgment about how we organize these things.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Just that I agree with what Councilmember Poole just said, and I think it's great having a new town manager because you can come in and assess from a fresh perspective how things are working and identify opportunities that may have been missed before because things were running well and the same. So I think this is all great. I know the Winship Park Firewise Neighborhood Group, it's all volunteers. And it would be wonderful to, we have a collection of 160 residents and all their emails and phone numbers, and whether or not they need special evacuation assistance, et cetera. And it's run by a volunteer. So it would be great to have someone help us manage that information to ensure that it's current and accurate, and then get it going in lots of other places where it's really needed.
Okay,
Thank you, Krista. This was a really helpful overview.
yeah, thank you. Just a couple more points about the general government. So our outside services are 16% higher than the prior year budget due to the following things. I've increased the hours of legal service, not the hourly rate, the number of legal services, the hours. We have an 11% increase for audit services that our auditor has informed us of. I am going to need the post office lease is coming up for renewal, and so I'm going to have to get a rent, a rent appraisal. Just they want to pay us less than they're paying now, so I definitely want to get an appraisal. A cyber risk assessment consultant, I put a little money in the budget for that, just in case I'm not comfortable with what Marin IT is proposing. So we have opportunity to get a free cyber risk assessment. It's just, we've signed up for it. Chief Pata signed up for it through it's like a federal Homeland Security division. But there's an 8-month backlog. So I just put a little money in there in case we need to go down that route. I put funding in the budget for a record retention policy update. The record retention policy, which we have, is getting old. It needs to be updated. It should be updated annually. There is a consultant who she's a former city clerk, and she did work here, I think 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. She did the last update, and she is incredibly, it's a very modest amount of money. And then we pay her a very, very modest amount of money, and she'll update it every year because the law changes every year. We need to make sure we've got our records retention policy and that we're following it. And then the increase by the town's IT consultant for upgrades. This general government budget also includes the community homeless fund contribution for the upcoming fiscal year of $9,300 is what that says, $9,000, $9,300. And this is a continuation from the program last year, and it's for the shower program in San Rafael. And it's my understanding that the homeless, so Mayor Pro Tem Cole, you're on the homeless subcommittee? Yeah, that, the program is about to expire. And so the homeless committee and the city managers group has decided to go forward with it for another year. And this is Ross's share. And then the final item is the contribution to RPOA of $26,500 for support of their downtown enhancements and their events. And this is what the council considered at your last strategic planning workshop.
Councilmember Cool.
That's my recommendation. And so they requested this amount of money and the council indicated it was supportive of it. So I put it in the budget, and my intention would be they send us an invoice in the beginning of the fiscal year and for the things that they said that they would do. And we give them, I write a check and they take it, and then in the spring, they provide a report to the council on how it went, on how they spent the money, that kind of a thing. That was my intention. That's how I've done it in the past, and that way it's easier to do. Liz, are you all right with that? Okay, so I know you're tired of hearing about me. Oh, I was gonna hand it off to somebody else, but I'm sorry. I just got to talk about the fire department, and then I'll take a break, and you can hear from somebody new. But just a few highlights about the fire department expenditures. Their budget is still being developed. So as I said before, these are, we might see some changes in this one. Their expenses are budgeted at 2.8 million. This is 5% higher than the current budget. The JPA cost, excluding capital, is estimated at 2.3. That's excluding capital. And then we also give them a certain chunk of money, $83,000 for equipment replacement, and that is 4% higher than the previous year. That's what we're budgeting. Their budget does include 2 line items of $54,000 each for wildfire defensible space and wildfire local prevention. This is 100% funded by the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and that's included in intergovernmental revenue. So the expense hits this, but we're getting it back in revenue. And then the Mira notes, which is the radios and bonds, have been paid off. Yay. So the budget is 0 for that in fiscal year 23. And now, if Chief Fata is here and not out on a call, do you have time to do this? Okay. He might be called out. In that case, I'll come up and finish for him.
Oh, do you want to take? There's a request to take a 1-minute break,
Okay.
a 2-minute break. And as part of that break, I brought some lemons from our tree in their paper bags, so you can. When we're live. Okay, thank you. We're resuming the special meeting of the Ross Town Council, the annual workshop, and we will now hear about police department expenditures from Police Chief Pata.
Johnson, thanks for having me here this morning, and I look forward to discussing with you my budget, or my version, my proposal for next year's budget. And so we'll just start with going through the slide. I'm going to be operating off of page 15 and 16 of the proposed budget. So our budget is going to be up 10.2% from the past year, and there's a couple of reasons for that. My original analysis in looking at this was to look at our staffing, and we've had a really interesting year with staffing. Looking at some of the numbers, for example, our sergeant pay went up from 200,000 in 21-22 fiscal to projected 22-23. And that's going to largely be because we're going to be promoting a sergeant actually today, sometime today. I look forward to promoting a sergeant or hiring a sergeant. We've been operating with 1 sergeant. The sergeant's really a first-line supervisor here in town. We haven't had one for well over a year. We had one of our sergeants was out on medical disability leave, and so we had to backfill for that position. And a lot of that was me in the middle of the night, which is okay. And but we look forward to bringing somebody in. When that happens, of course, the cost will go up because we'll have to pay for that position now. The person, whoever I select, will be paid based on their experience. Really, we have different levels of steps for when we bring in new employees here, and there's no exception for that. So based on their experience, that's how that will go for the budget. But that will be part of the proposed increase for next year. So that does put us up a little bit. The officer's position, it's been another category for us that we've had some struggles with. We lost a probationary employee, and then we lost another officer from a medical disability retirement. So that cost will go up. There's a lot to that as far as the hiring and bringing that person in, and then bringing them in based on their experience again, or what step they come in on. So we've proposed to increase that from 21-22 fiscal at 380 to around 530,000 for 22-23. So what has been going on as a result of our staffing issues, we've had to pay a lot of overtime because we haven't had somebody to work those shifts. So that all of those costs are factored into our budget, and I think that's I'm hoping that will be resolved when we bring new people in, but there is some startup costs to that. So that's part of the proposal there. Depending on who I bring in for those positions, if I bring a new officer in, obviously I'll be paying them at the beginning step. But if I bring somebody in with 20 or 30 years of experience, I'm probably gonna have to bring them in at a higher step. So I'm trying to be sensitive to all of that and trying to factor that in. It's a little bit of a moving target, but I think that number is good in front of you on page 15. Same goes with longevity pay and educational certificates, holiday pay. All of those things are going to fluctuate depending on who we have here. So for example, we have right now 4 officers here who have reached the maximum of time that they've been here. They've been here longer than 15 years. So they will be paid, they get incentives for being here longer. So for example, the state of California issues certificates based on your years of service and training and experience. All of our officers now have advanced certificates, and there's something in the MOU for that. So I've tried to build that into the proposal for next year. Again, that may change with new officers coming in. If I have somebody who is not quite as experienced and has not reached those milestones, then those numbers may be a little bit less. So those are all considerations. So the same goes with holiday pay. So people who have been here past a certain amount of time get a certain amount of holiday time off, a certain amount of vacation time off. So those accrual rates are all built into this process, and that does create some of the proposed numbers here that are a little bit, might be a little bit of a moving target, but the numbers appear to be good here for me. Moving down, again, also on page 15, looking at dispatch services. I'm sorry, to make sure it's on the same page here. Yeah, dispatch services. So I pulled up our contract and I looked at that. So that contract was negotiated years ago. We're in the middle of it. It was negotiated by Chief Masterson, or then Chief Masterson, and then Chief Morin from the Fairfax Police Department. In looking at the contract, which I have a copy of, there is fiscal year increases that started, it was signed in 2020, and it goes through and ends in 2026. And it looks like for the next few years until it terminates, it'll be going up about $5,000 a year. And that's based on a formula that Chief Morin and Chief Masterson came up with. It was brought before, well, actually the former town manager was involved in it, and Mr. Chin, and was signed off in 2020. I looked at that, and I also looked at what else is happening in dispatch services to see if maybe there was a better deal for us moving forward. And I'm pretty confident we have the best deal that we can get. For example, the town of Belvedere is paying $115,409 per year compared to our proposed cost of $65,000. Mill Valley is paying $438,000, and Central Marin's paying almost $1 million, $949,000. Those costs cover 911 answering the phone in the middle of the night for us, whether it be 911 or our business number, our 24-hour business number, the 2727 number for non-emergency. Covers alarm calls and responses, as well as data input from dispatch center. So that's what that increase looks like for us and kind of the things that are covered in it. We had talked about Mira earlier. The town manager had talked about that. I looked at that contract. That's another formulaic contract that was done years ago. I'm not sure if this council signed off on that or another one, but that's been going on for a number of years. And that, yeah, and the Mira, and that basically deals with our radio system. These radios are due to be replaced soon. They have the shelf life on these. I was actually on the original committee for that more than 20 years ago. The shelf life is really about 11 years on these things. So they've done a fairly good job of keeping them working, but the parts are starting to run out, and the whole infrastructure has to be replaced as well as the unit. So we're paying forward on that, and that's a yearly thing that we do. Publications went up in my budget. When I took over, I noticed that we had penal codes going back from to 2012. So I decided to upgrade the penal codes. And while the percentage looks high, we're talking about a couple of $100. The penal codes are $200 each. So things like that, penal codes, bless you, evidence codes, things that we need to do our job better. Those are the things that we need around the office. So those are some of the publications that I've continued and ordered. Legal update material, all of that stuff we have to pay for. Some of it is a subscription because some of it's online, but some of it is actually a hard copy. They're still making hard copies of some of that stuff. The Marin OES contract was interesting to me. I had to pull up the contract to look at it. Again, that's another item, and that's on page, it's also on page 15. The service contract for OES was signed years ago, actually not so long ago. It was signed July 1st of 2021. Again, this was done before me, but with Mr. Chin as the town manager, and it basically lines out that it's a multi-year contract and that it incorporates a liaison, administration services. Probably the most important part is the communication services, which is the access to a duty officer and people that I can rely on if there is an emergency that I can call, and people there who will push out information through Alert Marin. So it's a pretty robust service that we pay for. Disaster service, worker registration, and consulting. And actually, this might be a good time to talk about our town and OES. So I think I'd mentioned before when I spoke to you about our flood, or our near flood actually, last year when the river was getting to a point where it was going to be a problem for us. I quickly learned that we ran out of resources very quickly. And so one of the things I've been trying to promote actually is more involvement in our community with members of our community who are able to do things. So I attended a meeting, a couple neighborhood meetings where we discussed how we really need to rely on each other here in town, because if we're having an emergency, I guarantee that our neighbors in Central Marin or the college will be having similar issues. So resources will run out fast. So we will be there to do the emergency stuff, but there are other things for our neighbors that that we need to encourage them to help do. I think That's part of the DISCO program that you guys originally had that transformed into Ross Ready and RossNet. So I've been meeting with Mr. Fleetus on and off over the last year. Our last meeting was in January, but I've also been meeting with our council for aging, the Aging Task Force. And the reason is because there are people in town that may have access functional needs, and I really want them to get the services and the help that they need. I want to identify who those things are. So even if we, as a police department, can't run to the rescue, we can at least notify people to get there to help them out. And that's the kind of the reason why I wanted to build that up as much as I could. So we do have some workshops coming up forward. It's really mostly being run, but by our neighbors, but I'm going to participate as much as I can because I think it's important for them to know kind of our position and what we're trying to do to help out. So I just want to slide that in because I know that came up a little bit. Which kind of leads to the disaster council, the DISCO or the Ross Ready thing. That appears on our budget, and that's really what those numbers represent. And it is located, well, it's on page 16 where it shows that has gone up in my budget. A lot of that's going to be slow. So the disaster, the evacuation tags, publication work that I've done, we have to pay for some of that. Some of that's covered by OES, but there's also other costs that we pay for out of our publication budget. Finally, supplies. Our supplies, our investigative supplies, all have a shelf life on them. There's a lot of stuff that we had to get rid of. Processing for DNA, if we were to have a case, you kind of have to have it with us. Stuff for how to safely package up firearms if we were to get some, and we have actually taken some in the past. All of that stuff falls under the investigative costs. Evidence recovery stuff like fingerprint powder, all of that stuff has a shelf life and goes bad, so we have to replace it on a fairly regular basis. And then finally, training and classes. I foresee a lot of training is going to be needed with new supervisors coming on board, with new officers coming on board. All of that's going to require the mandated state training of 24 hours a year, but there's other additional things. For example, we lost a field training officer. So when a new officer is onboarded to the department, they have to go through a state certified field training program. So we have to have officers that have that training so that we're covered, that we've done all of the things that we need to do within the state requirements. So, so putting people through all of these training programs is expensive. We do have to send some of them away to get some of this training because it doesn't always happen here in the county. But we're pretty mindful of doing as much as we can in the county. The COVID stuff is starting to go away in the sense that they're now requiring in-person training, whereas last year and the year before we were doing a lot of stuff by video. So that kind of covers a lot of my budget. One of the things that is new is community engagement. So we really didn't have anything for community engagement. We had a miscellaneous category here, but I'm trying to enhance that by bringing to us National Night Out this year. It's a huge law enforcement community engagement night. It happens throughout the United States. There's 38,000 communities that do it, and we did it in my last agency, and it's a huge event. It's great, and it develops trust, and it's just for everybody. So that'll be coming our way, and those things weren't covered before in the budget. So those are some of the new proposals that are coming your way, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Chief Pata? Councilmember Poole.
I'm not sure this is a question exactly, but I have been looking for an opportunity to raise this point. I'm not sure it even would cost any money. I'm concerned about the status of our emergency, I'm not even sure what you call it, our emergency planning, our emergency plan. I know there's a publication that's 30 or 40 pages or so that we have that sets out that plan. And one of the things that bothers me about it, or that I think should be added to it, is an assignment of some duties to the council members. When, well, certainly when emergencies happen. I mean, council members could answer the phones so that more skilled people could be in the field, for example. I'd like to see us try and work that plan and work the council members and maybe others into it with specific assignments so that they just show up and do the job when an emergency, or maybe not even much of an emergency, when a situation develops that needs that kind of help. I don't think it would cost much, might cost nothing, but I think it's an important addition that should be made to our emergency plan.
I agree. I think, I remember actually when we had the rain, I know a couple of members of council had called me and offered their services. So I'll definitely, I would love the help. So I will, I'll put something in the plan and maybe we can have a training. I think we're overdue for like a tabletop. I'd like to see that happen as well. I've thought about and done some research on doing an evacuation drill here in town. It's a pretty huge undertaking, so I'm trying to recruit some Confederates to help me do that, both at the fire department and our local partnering agencies. I went and I watched Mill Valleys. It's a pretty huge deal to do it, but I think it's necessary. But thank you, Councilman Cool. I'll definitely put something together for that. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember McMillan.
I was just going to say we need to be trained to.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority may be able to help with evacuation drills.
Right. So I've been attending the Zone Haven meetings, which is it's an initiative, I believe, related to wildfire, and it's good. It's pretty simple in the sense of, there's only a few ways out of town, but I think they're very important things, and if we can pull off an evacuation drill, that's my goal. So thank you for that. And I'll look for training.
Any other questions? Councilmember Rex.
Well, to Beach's point, I mean, answering phones and then knowing what to do, I mean, that could require a bit of training, but I think, like, for example, with what we did during COVID, where we were trying to get people's paper or mail and make sure that people who might need the help were helped, maybe we could at least reach out to Age Friendly and identify who are seniors that should be checked in on. And then that would be something that, council members certainly could consider and do. Because even if we ever get our block captains up to, what they should be, the five of us, we don't know what the block captains are doing. Maybe they're out of town or something, but, at least you would have, probably 4 or 5 of us in town and able to, call or walk around or check in on people who need that kind of help.
Yeah, I agree. That was part of why I started meeting with Age Friendly and the Marin Center for Independent Living. So one of the things that came out of one of my neighborhood meetings was that I actually saw somebody at the meeting that needed some help getting into the meeting, and I thought that, if they need help getting to this meeting, they're probably going to need help getting out of town. So so working with Terry, I'm sorry, was it Dowling? Yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. Working with her, we have been meeting again with Diane as well, Ruddy, and trying to come up with a good plan. So one of the things that we talked about was, how do we identify those people, and do they want to be identified to the police department? And my thought was they probably wouldn't want to be identified to the police department. So we're working with the Marin Center for Independent Living on finding something that works, so there's no database that we're holding on people that may not want to have that at the police station. But so there is something in the works on that. But yeah, I'd love to have you guys help out and be part of that. So I'll work on putting that together.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. That was, sorry, Councilmember Kircher.
We've had some discussions and correspondence about traffic issues, particularly speeding along Sir Francis Drake and endangering pedestrians. Are there any equipment requirements here or budgetary considerations? Are there things that, well, maybe might be on a wish list but are not in the budget now that we should be just thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like the mobile radar signs get people's attention. We have one posted just before. It doesn't seem to be working with getting their attention, but those kinds of things would be a great asset if we could find them. I mean, I can borrow them from the Highway Patrol, or I can borrow them from our parent or other agencies around here, but it would be nice to have our own so that we can set those things up. Yeah, I do a little bit of borrowing and sometimes begging to get some of these things. So, yeah.
And then my other question on disaster preparedness and so forth. Equipment in terms of just notifying everybody. We have the Marin Alert, and that works pretty well when cell phones are working, right? But ways to warn the community, and I know the council's had discussions about this around Horn and so forth and whatnot, but are there equipment issues or two? I know some of the other areas, I think it was Mill Valley, I remember a discussion there about these specialized bullhorn type things or megaphones where you can really reach a lot of people on hillsides and so forth. That might be very useful to the police, for example.
Yeah, I think the fixing the alarm is going to go a long way towards that. We have a lot of notification services available. The Marin Alert system, pushing that out, is probably going to be the go-to. It looks like we're condensing to one because it does get a little confusing. You have Nixle, Marin Alert, social media, things like that. So we're trying to make it so that, and it's good that we're getting the word out when those things happen. But again, I borrow the Nixle services from our friends at Ross Valley because there's a cost associated with it. So I borrow that. They're very good about allowing us to use that. We have our alarm. We have access to, with the county, to push out notifications. One of the troubles was that in the old days, we all had landlines. So it was easy to send that information out. Now with phones, it's different. The cell phones, it's different. And I'm finding that technology is becoming kind of problematic. So, so those are great ideas. And I think we have some things in place, but yes.
Ross Ready has been working on trying to get walkie-talkies for people and doing training along those lines.
Yep. We have one at the station. I know that when I do my fire drills on Friday, when I hit the alarm, I've reached out to Gil and asked their people to, maybe it'd be a good time for them to do a little training as well so that they can call out that they hear it or something. So we know at least it's not this vacuum. But yeah.
Councilmember Breckus.
You know, it was maybe even this week, there was a jurisdiction, might have been Mill Valley, that purchased, if I'm remembering the storyline, they purchased a generator to make sure that there was a space, like a community center, that had the ability for people to go there when there was heat and to charge phones when phones were out and that kind of thing.
Yeah, those are all good ideas. Yeah.
I mean, I know this budget is, it looks to me like it was kind of static for a few years, and now we're going up. We went up 10% almost the year prior, and it's headed in that direction this year.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we do need to be conscious of the fact that those are big increases for the town, but some of them are probably one-offs.
Mayor, I just wanted to remind the council about one of the reasons that their budget is going up 10% is because it's now including the cops. The police officer position and benefits has been moved the COPS fund, as our accountant was describing earlier in the meeting, into the police department. So the police department budget is now truly reflecting its level of 8 staff members, a full staffing of 8. Whereas last year, there were 7 positions and 1 in this separate fund. So that's primarily the reason it's going up 10%.
But last year it went up 10% almost. If I mean, maybe my math is wrong, but if you look at the, sorry, if you look, yeah, it was like at 16. Wait, where was that? Yeah, it was at 1629, 1,629. Then it went to 1,677. Then it went to 1,808, down from what it was projected, but still quite a jump. And now it's at 2,044,000. So it is going up, and I'm not sure that if that change happened when you're referring to, then that doesn't really explain the trajectory.
'21-22 estimated actual is 1.8. So I'm looking on the end of the budget on page 16. I think that's where you're looking, Councilmember Marcus. So 0.8 now budget for next fiscal year is 2,044,000. That 10% difference is largely attributable to this issue of, is it $165,000?
Yes, 169,000.
$169,000 being moved into this budget, then the remaining amount is more of a typical, our costs are going up every year. I have to look a little bit more. I don't know, Liz, if you understand why it went up between fiscal year.
I will figure that out.
That the actual in fiscal year ending 21 was 1. And so that's $28,000. Sorry, I wasn't a math major. So that's an increase of, and I'm not sure. We'd have to look into it and get back to you about why. But it's certainly not, absolutely, it's going to be going up every year. We'd have
Cost of living, step increases, curbs going up. I don't think it was
insurance.
one.
It's a contract, right? Contract.
Police officers' contract had a COLA increase every year. So if you'd like, Councilmember Marcus,
No,
I'm happy to do a deeper dive into it and get the information back to you. But I think we do need to be keeping a lid on our costs. But I think we can work on that. Also, there are some grants and just opportunities available through county OES and some other things. We just need to do the legwork to it. And the chief has done a lot of work, but for example, I've had great success in organizations with the Nixle program. We can also, if there's a cost associated with it, I know there is, I'd like to know, bring it. And there are other uses of a Nixle program that can be really popular with residents in terms of traffic announcements of jams and some other community engagement opportunities. So we can look into that in particular and see how it costs and bring it to the council and see how it would work here, how much it would cost, what's the benefit,
Councilmember McMillan.
Thank you. I was just going to ask about station repairs, like 10,000? No, 25,000? It was budgeted last year for 25, but only 10 was paid, and now it's budgeted again for 25.
Yeah. And I'd have to defer a little of that to Rich, but I think that's for things like in the event the roof has problems. Again, in the last fiscal, we did have the roof was a pretty huge issue for us. I think maybe it's to prepare to have something as a placeholder in the event something happens. I don't
But
know.
that's something that once we get our facilities addressed, that line item could be almost taken down to zero.
Yeah.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Well, Chief Potter, thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Steve. Okay, so next up we have our interim director, David Woltering, who has just a couple of slides about our planning department.
Madam Mayor and council members, I'm pleased to be here to give you an update on our proposed planning and building department budget and to respond to your questions. Let me go through the slide with you. The planning and building department budget of $1.2 million is about 2.5% higher than the prior year. Wages and benefits are 4.6% higher than the prior year budget, and that's primarily due to the cost of living adjustment. Kind of a highlight is outside services. Outside services in the department, that amount is $441,000, and that's 2.3% less than fiscal year 2022. In 2022, that line item is about $506,000. What we're finding in the planning and building department and the organization perhaps generally is that with mandates, there is a need to hire consultants, and these outside services costs are large, and they also require quite a bit of work on the part of permanent staff in terms of coordination, facilitation, providing information and management. I think sometimes when one thinks about hiring a consultant, the thought is that the consultant will simply do the work. As we're finding with the housing element update, the town has hired an excellent firm, but there's a lot of coordination, a lot of information that needs to be gathered and provided to the consultant so the consultant can do the work. So for example, planning consultants are budgeted at $291,000, which includes the housing element update for the coming fiscal year of $156,000. Given what I've just mentioned in terms of that coordination, the management, the facilitation, gathering information, we're finding that within the department, the planner who does the current planning work really is doing a lot of that coordination, gathering information and providing it to the consultant. And as we look at some of the projects I'll mention down below here on this slide and the following slide, there really is a need to add service, add capacity to the department. So the proposed budget is indicating that a contract planner would be hired. And the idea really is that not only would that contract planner provide support, assistance to the current planner, but also provide assistance in terms of gathering information and providing that to the consultants on these various projects, and also working on some of these projects. So as an example, there's the ongoing housing element update. There's the mandated SB 9 local ordinance. The town attorney has given us a very good example, a model ordinance to work with, but still, in order of conforming that model ordinance, that SB 9 model ordinance, to the needs of the town of Ross, and then processing that ordinance through the town council for adoption, that's going to take time. In addition, there's indicated a vehicle miles traveled ordinance. That ordinance is very important to have prepared and would cost about $45,000 to do that. The nature of that study and ordinance would be that for the overall town, the town of Ross, there would be an analysis of traffic circulation, and with that, an understanding of greenhouse gas emissions. By having that information, then as there are individual projects, there would not be the need to do a vehicle miles travel study, a detailed study for each and every project, but there could be the reliance on the overall ordinance and the standards and parameters in that ordinance with minor work with the individual projects. So for example, with the housing element update, had the community town-wide vehicle miles traveled ordinance, there wouldn't be a need to do the detailed VMT analysis with the housing element update. That's an example. There would be a lesser study and a lesser cost. In addition, there's going to be a need to put together an ADU toolkit. We've touched on that a little bit with the housing element update. It's obviously going to be very important since this community is going to rely so heavily on accessory dwelling units to meet the RHNA, the 111 units of RHNA. As we heard from Andrew Hill, hopefully the analysis will turn out that maybe 50% of those ADUs could be considered lower income units, which would be terrific in terms of meeting the RHNA number. But providing people information within the community as to how they can process their accessory dwelling unit applications and provide that assistance will be important. So the ADU toolkit will provide that. As you well know, with the Branson School amendment, use permit amendment, there's going to be a requirement for an annual review, a traffic analysis and review, and there'll be a need to monitor that on the town side. There's been some discussion so far in this session about training and state mandates. So for example, in the Planning and Building Department, it's required, it's a state mandate, that an individual in the department have training that's referred to as CASP training. It's essentially Americans with Disabilities Act accessibility training. That's a state mandate, that's a requirement. Right now the town's relying on an outside consultant to meet that need, that requirement. It would be better, and in particular, if that consultant is no longer employed by the town, to have that ability on staff among permanent staff. So the intent here, and we've looked into this, and the senior building inspector is studying for and is planning to attend a course in June so as to get that training so that the town would have internally, in-house, that state mandated capability. Another item is TrackIt, our tracking system. So in terms of accepting applications, processing applications, inputting information, and comments, referral comments from various departments, this is a key tool in the Planning and Building Department and with other departments as well. And there's a need to continue to maintain this tool and provide it to our planning and building staff and public works as well. And there's a cost for that. Again, I've been talking a little bit about the general plan update, housing element and that project. And we had a nice presentation earlier from Andrew Hill, the consultant on that. In terms of funding that, the funding source for that is the general plan update fund, and there'll be a transfer to the operating fund for paying for those services. And then what we know is that we have a lot of documents here, a lot of documents that have been accumulated over time, hard copy paper documents in storage that really need to be scanned and saved and preserved. And in the budget, there's $25,000 of proposed budget for scanning services. This is something that perhaps has not been done, although budgeted in the past. It's important to be done and should be followed through with. Those are some of the key items that we have in our budget, the Planning and Building Department budget, and I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Yes, Councilmember McMillan.
I'm just wondering if the proposed contract planner could also help with the facilities master plan.
You know, that's a possibility. And again, I think the town manager, in terms of the range of services, would give guidance on that as far as the analyst position and whatnot. But you're right, in terms of just the coordination, as we're seeing with the housing element update, it would be very similar that consultant team for that project, the town facilities master plan, will need data and information, and somebody is going to need to, a variety of people are going to need to gather that and provide it to the consultant team.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Kircher.
From time to time, I have complaints about the fees that are charged for planning, for plan checking, for building permits, et cetera. And my understanding is that it's sort of net neutral. In other words, those fees cover our cost. Is that correct? Do we make money on this? Do we lose money on it? And I'm excluding things that are special projects like updating our housing element and so forth.
You know, I might defer that to the accountant to give maybe an understanding, or the manager on that, as far as just the revenues generated and then the expenditures. Maybe I can seek some assistance on that.
So, thank you for the question, Councilmember Kircher. So it's a couple years ago, there was a fee study done. A consultant came in and did a very thorough analysis of the costs to provide these services. So they're user pay, whoever's needing the service is paying for it. So that was done. The study came to council. Council adopted the fees, and part of the resolution that went to council was an annual increase the fees based on Bay Area CPI. So we used the November CPI number, and we used that. We increased the fees by that, rounding it down, not up, down. And then those go into effect on January 1st and are posted to the website.
So is then the idea is cover our costs?
Yes, and
But
then
it's not a moneymaker for the town.
no, and we will, a few years from now, we will be we'll need to update that fee study to keep it current, and that's a check to make sure as our fees are increasing, that it's reflecting the true costs.
Councilmember Cool.
There is a state law. I used to know the proposition number by which it was referred, which limits a town or any governmental entity to charging only its costs, no more than its costs, to members of the public, for example, who need planning permits to do things. And there have been court rulings that if you charge more than the cost, you are in essence taxing the rest of the community. And in order to do that, you need a 2/3 vote. So it's very important to make sure that we're only charging our costs. Now, that still leaves some flexibility for an entity to determine what are costs that are chargeable. But all I'm saying is there are some limitations placed on what you could do by way of charging a member of the community for services in connection with issuing a permit.
Councilmember Breckus.
Yeah, there was a time right after we got on council that planning costs went dramatically up, and we had a lot of complaints. And we looked at it and reduced costs because, in fact, they were too high. And that was a problem. And so when we hear numbers like rec is making more than its expenses, then that needs to be adjusted so that we're not doing that. But what we're charging for is capturing everything. So we're capturing the cost of air conditioning, the cost of pensions, the cost of general plan updating and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure if we're, like the planners get calls from the realtors. Can I do this on a project? Or someone who's never going to build, can I do this? I don't have 100% knowledge of whether, people who are planning are paying for people who are not planning and how that all works. But when we've done studies, but that probably was covered when we did the study, but that does have to be looked, and we do have to keep an eye on that when we hear about, expenditures over, or funding coming in, revenue coming in over expenditures, so that we're not doing that.
Councilmember McMillan.
So I have kind of the flip question, which is if there's a ceiling on how much we can charge based on how much it's costing us to provide the service, does that mean that we're precluded from not charging the full amount, say, for an ADU? Because then everyone else would be subsidizing the cost of, for the permitting of the ADU.
Councilmember McMillan, so state law already prohibits municipalities from charging certain fees for ADU development. That's already in there. So
If we want to encourage people to do ADUs, if we were to consider reducing the fee for ADUs, is that something that we could do?
I believe so. I believe it's possible to put it into to take action on that. And the fees that are not allowed to be charged are, I believe, impact fees. So we're still charging building fees for ADUs. And if the council was interested in some kind of incentive or maybe for, I believe that has been done, especially for ones that are deed restricted for low income occupants. That could be something that could be explored. And I believe that you've brought that up, I believe, with our housing consultant too. It's on his list. Okay.
I will say a lot of work was done. So, but the fees were considerable. They were a very significant portion of the cost of the ADU. And it wasn't just Ross, it was everybody. The Fire Authority, I mean, the West Valley Fire Department, the Marin Sanitary Service, the municipal water, whatever we call it. And so there was quite a bit there. And then, of course, we've got architecture and consultants and structural engineers again, and one more time. So it's expensive, but it's, you know, it's a safe building. As our contractor said, we could put a swimming pool in over it. So, okay, or not.
Councilmember Cool.
I would just comment or remind people, some of you weren't here when it happened, but 5 or 6 years ago, we had a resident sue over the amount of fees that we had charged him for the necessary permits for him to put a new roof on his house. And our town manager, he's a lawyer who was a former partner of mine. And our town manager studied up and went out to court, beat him by proving that we had charged no more than what our costs were. And I think another thing you have to keep in mind, another maybe answer to some of these complaints is, if you want Ross to be what it is now, and you want to keep it that way, you're going to have to allow those who control what gets built in Ross to do the job that will keep the project the way you want it to be in Ross. Thank you.
Any other comments? So I think we should probably pick up the pace a little bit if we can.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's see if we can do a couple things, maybe till 12:30, then take a break for lunch then. What do you think, Krista?
Absolutely.
Okay,
So we can handle Public Works.
and maybe even more. We'll
Yeah.
see.
We have
I
an
think this is gonna
estimate.
be fast.
Do we
Thank
have
you,
an
Mayor and
estimate of where we
Council.
are in terms of,
That's a good question. At this pace, well, no, let's pick up the pace. If we pick up the pace and have a brief lunch break, what do you think timing wise?
Please have Rich to spend, he only has one slide, and then Gretchen has just a couple of slides of recreation, and I know she's going to be fast. And then we have a little bit about, we go into just, the rest of it, I think we can get through pretty quickly.
Wonderful. Okay. Rich, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Rich Simmons, Public Works Director.
We're going to be talking about Public Works Department expenditures under the operating fund. So that is in your budget. That's tab L, pages 18 and 19 if you wanted to follow along. But I'm going to summarize the budget rather quickly here. Public Works Department expenses budgeted at $998,000. Again, this is just the operating fund. We're going to be talking about the capital improvements in a little bit further on in the presentation. It's a 6% increase over the prior budget. It includes staffing for, I need to move something here out of the way. Yeah, staffing for the 3 positions, that has not changed. That's basically me, Public Works Director, Anthony and Zach are 2 maintenance workers. Wages and benefits are 9% higher than the prior year budget, which is due to employee step increases, COLA, cost of living adjustment, and an employee salary adjustment. Building, land, street, tree maintenance costs of $300,000 is 4% higher. These costs are partially offset by our Marin County Measure A park funds. $23,000 from Ross School, where they assist in the maintenance of Ross Common, and $15,000 annual Marin County Creek maintenance reimbursement, which we entered into an agreement last year, which renewed a prior agreement. Street and tree maintenance costs of $125,000 are budgeted at the same price, same amount as the prior budget. And then we added, it's a small amount currently, for $5,000 for an urban forestry plan. And very briefly, what we're doing, this is a risk management measure that the town is taking under the Public Works Department, where we will inventory trees within the town-owned properties, not necessarily, in fact, not in public right-of-ways, but town-owned properties such as here at the town hall, this entire parcel, Ross Common, including the post office areas, Natalie Coffin Green Park, and Frederick Allen Park, and then there's a few other parcels that the town owns along Sir Francis Drake. So we're going to be assessing the health of those trees, inventorying them, entering them into a GIS type database where we'll be able to monitor their health annually and take measures to make sure that they're healthy and that they don't pose any risks to the public. And we will act on that plan annually to make sure that our trees in the public or town-owned areas are kept healthy and safe for the public. So really generally that covers the, in a nutshell, the Public Works Department expenditures under the operating fund. They are detailed out a little bit better on pages 18 and 19. And I am here to answer any questions that you might have regarding this element of the town budget.
Thank you. Are there questions for Rich about Public Works? Councilmember Herscher.
On the subject of tree maintenance,
Yes.
as I understand it, this item is only for town-owned properties. And so this wouldn't apply to, for example, that tree that came down across Lagunitas.
So
it was on private property.
Yes, the urban forestry plan that we're developing is only for town-owned properties. However, the tree maintenance budget is separate from that. It would be separate and a part of our annual action on items addressed or identified in the urban forestry plan. So, yeah.
So this problem of diseased trees or old trees that are in danger of falling but are on private property, does anyone have jurisdiction over that at the governmental level, or is that really up to the private property owners?
It is up to the private property owners, including the trees that are in the public right-of-way along their frontage. But our maintenance guys are constantly out there identifying dead or dying trees that may be a hazard and notifying those residents that they need to remove those trees. And we normally, we don't charge for the encroachment permit, for them to remove it, since it is a hazard and is something that we are requesting, but they do have to pay their own tree removal costs.
Okay, so if the town thought a tree was dangerous, but it was on private property, and the owner didn't want to do anything, I suppose the town could sue a nuisance in action. I don't know if we'd even be able to do that.
We could
But
review
should
it under
we
the public nuisance
Yeah.
municipal code, which means if it's threatening a few other neighbors besides themselves, and we can take action that way. The fire department also sometimes provides backup, but they'll come through and they'll say, hey, this is a fire hazard. You know, not only do you need to comply with what Ross is saying, but we need you to take that tree down as well for fire hazards. So the fire department provides occasional backup on those types of issues. So, but there's only so much we can do, yeah, when it's on private property.
Councilmember McMillan?
If the fire department says that a property owner needs to take down a tree, do we still charge that property owner for an arborist report to get the tree removed?
You know, that's a great question, and it's something we are considering about, because that is the number one complaint is it's dead. It's obviously dead. Why do we require an arborist report? It is in the municipal code. We can't waive that requirement until I think we amend the municipal code or clarify it in that respect. But that's a current conversation between Anthony and I and the town manager.
Because we could change it so that you have some discretion about needing a permit, right? That'd be a nice thing to do.
Yeah, I'd be up for that.
The public works director can waive all that requirement. I think that is in the tree ordinance. I'm loath to do that though, because you know, I need to, safest just to follow municipal code until we've got a little bit more ministerial direction in our municipal code.
Maybe that'll be an upcoming agenda item. Councilmember Breckus.
I understand that you looked at that little, right over here, that little concrete kind of decorative thing on the corner, kitty corner from our fire station. And
Yes.
saw that that was in the right of way.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is.
Can we, or do you have any room in the budget to do some kind of improvements to that? It's actually, I think, quite attractive, and it would be a nice little area to have kind of a gateway, you know, and I don't know if there's been any discussion between the town and that property owner just to clarify that it's right of way. But is there anything in the budget that would allow you to make some attractive improvements to that?
Not specifically in this year's budget, but we still have a month or two to make those types of adjustments. I mean, we do have a little bit of budget where we are considering adding landscaping to the open parcels next to the St. Anselm's Church parking lot at the corner of Bolinas and Sir Francis Drake. A similar type of beautification of our right-of-way and points of entry. So yeah, we could do something like that.
Can I suggest that if you do, that you bring it to our ADR? Because I don't know if you were not here, I don't think, but when a prior town manager put up the signs that say police and town hall and the railings, everybody's was really unhappy with the aesthetics of it. And we all kind of agreed that the aesthetics of these things should be brought through that group so that we avoid that kind of a complaint.
Yeah, I don't see anything but a benefit in running those sort of things by ADR and council before we turn it into a capital project. Yes.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have time to do a
Yes.
recreation? Okay, so our recreation manager, Gretchen, is here. She just has just a couple of slides to go through.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Gretchen Kastetz, Recreation Manager. So yeah, I just have 2 slides that we'll go over. And we are looking at tab letter M for the recreation expenses, if you wanted to look there. So quickly, the expenses are all in response to a positive cost recovery from the time that we were in COVID. As many of you know, recreation was definitely one of the departments that was, I guess, hit hardest by COVID. So we've had a lot of effort to kind of come out of that, and you'll see that we have been successful at moving in a positive direction. So start there. So the expenses are 14% higher, but that again is in relation to the revenue also being higher. Wages are budgeted 12% higher, and that is because when COVID came, we lowered our FTE number down to 1.75. I'm nervous, sorry. So pre-COVID, we were at 2.5, we went down to 1.75, and our suggestion is to move up to 2.2. So we're still not at the pre-COVID number of FTE, but we are moving in that direction because our programming is increasing and we need people in there to do registration, emails, planning, with more events coming back and things like that. So outside services are expected to go up 11.5%, and that's mostly independent contractors, which would be program related. So that's what that number is. And per town council direction, the age-friendly group is now a new line item in this coming year's budget, which was not in the previous budget. So that would be at $8,000. And we've had a great year of working with them, and they're an incredible group of people. And I'm really excited to be able to do with this seed money and explore different avenues of how we can connect with more of the town, that demographic, and what we can do with them and special events and things like that. So that's been a very rewarding project for me, and I am very grateful for the council's support on that moving forward. Next, oh, that's me, sorry. So the $10,000, that's a standing annual fee that we pay to the Ross School for our long-term facility lease. So that number doesn't change, but that is in there. You will see that. And then we are looking forward to bringing back our 4th of July parade this coming fiscal year on, you guessed it, the 4th of July. And so we have increased the budget from 16,000 to 5,000, or increased it by 5,000. So that's where that 21,000 number is in there. The 5K is for the 4th of July parade, and looking forward to that. And let's see, and then of course, yes, also we had the town dinner last September, and we're going to be doing that again this September. And it was a great success, and it felt like people were really happy to be back together, and so looking forward to doing that again. And as town manager Krista Johnson had mentioned, we have added 2,000 into the budget for staff training, which I think is going to be really great for myself and the staff to just be able to have continued education and learn more about what we can do and provide the community. So I'm grateful for that, and I think we'll be able to do good things with it. Lastly, the custodial services have increased by 3,000 from the previous or the current year budget, and that is in response to the pilot program that we're going to be doing, having the external restrooms open there on the Ross School campus for weekends for the community and when there's different youth programs going on, so that they have access to a restroom on the Ross Common school side of things. So that's where that increase is, and that's all we have on the slides. And I'm looking forward to answering any questions you guys have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Gretchen? Comment, Councilmember
I
McClellan?
just have a comment. And Gretchen, I was at the age-friendly event at Crown and Crumpet, and it was wonderful. And so thank you for everything that you're doing to facilitate those synergies. I think it's working out really, really well.
Thank you for attending. That was so nice to have you there.
Councilmember Kircher.
The last couple of years, the pandemic has been a huge constraint on activities. is it still a constraint, or are we open again? I mean, what limitations remain?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. As far as, during the core of the pandemic, we were getting, constant changing and specific guidelines that we had to follow from the county and the state. So we're no longer getting that, list of pod sizes and things like that. And masks have been lifted for both indoor and outdoor. So we do not have the same restrictions anymore. And that's why, as we move into this coming fiscal year, that we've projected that we're going to be going back into the direction of hopefully similar or close to similar revenue numbers that we had before. Not quite there, because we haven't fully brought back all of our programming, but that is the direction we're going in. So thankfully, we do not have those limitations anymore, because that was quite a lot when we had to have such tiny little groups of kids, and it was all understandable, of course. It feels good to be kind of moving in a direction where it doesn't feel like we're as limited at all. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Gretchen.
Thank you.
Chris, what do you think? Do we keep going? Do we eat while we keep going? Do we break and then keep going?
It's up to the council, but this would be, if you do want to take a break in the presentation, this would be a good time, I believe, if you're hungry.
What would people like to do?
Or we're also happy to continue if you like.
Keep going through and then eat?
We can wrap up easily in 30 minutes. It just depends on how many council questions there are.
Let's do that. Let's forge ahead. Try to
You wanna
wrap up
forge
in 30
ahead?
minutes, and then we can have lunch at our leisure. How about that? Okay, do you all? Okay.
Great. So Rich is back, and he's going to just talk a little bit about some of our general fund capital projects and hit the other funds real quickly and get through this. Thank you, Rich.
Yes, Mayor and Council. So we talked a little bit about this in our last budget workshop we had last month. So I can go through it pretty quick, and I am happy to answer any questions that you might have. So Town Hall Facilities Master Plan, we budgeted $150,000 just to hire a consultant to start developing that plan. It's not really a capital expenditure, but it's definitely going to lead to quite significant expenditures. Ross Common Restoration, I got some budget or engineers' estimates in. So the $375,000 includes the pathway restoration improvement and the consultant design cost to develop the bid documents on that. We'll see once the bids come in how that might change. Town Hall parking lot improvements. So we talked about this a little bit too. The $25,000 more or less covers the design on that. I haven't got any estimates on what that's going to cost. We've been talking a little bit with the consultant. Of course, that's this project right out here around the redwood tree where we're going to remove all of the uplifting pavement and concrete. And we may have to lose this parking space here in front where the town manager parks, but we are going to gain a parking space up against the police station where the EV charger is. So no net loss there. And that design is kind of going through some flux as we talk to the town arborist. We definitely do not want to harm those large redwood trees there. So a little bit more on that maybe in the June meeting. Public safety building improvements, that's a standard placeholder. Every year there's always something that comes up. And I believe that does include the police station. So we'll make sure that there's no doubling up on that with what's in the police department budget and what's in the public works capital budget. ADA transition plan, the facilities, that's just to make sure all of our facilities, parks, and the town hall are compliant with the Americans with Disability Act. And we did identify a few minor improvements that need to be done, so we've put that money in as a placeholder. The toilet and porta potty enclosures at the two parks, those are underway. We're laying those out and starting construction. $10,000 is the capital outlay for that. It's a $20,000 project that's split 50-50 with the RPOA. Technology equipment for various departments, that's a general carryover that we have just to keep up to date with technology equipment. Workspace adjustments, that's to take into consideration any improvements we need to do to either the town hall, but mainly the public services portable next door to accommodate any additional employees that may be coming on board, as discussed earlier in the budget discussion. And with that comes a possible furniture expenditure. Gas tax fund projects really quick. So the gas tax funds are $138,000 in revenue, which is a 10% increase in the fiscal year end 22 actual. And this includes $58,000 from the RMRA SB1. What is that? I know what RMRA stands for, but what? Yes, yeah, it's related to that. So this revenue we allocate each year into our particular roadway improvement plan. This year it's the Fernhill Avenue pavement overlay plan and the Skyland Way slurry seal. So Road Maintenance and Recovery Act is RMRA. Yes, I knew it would come to me. So those are the gas tax fund projects. And roadway fund projects, really quickly, we did discuss these also last month at our last budget workshop. The road fund expenditures budgeted at $663,000 and funded just like every year with our impact fees. TAM Measure AA and actually TAM Measure B does kick in this year, give us a nice combined revenue of $97,000. Measure B comes around, I think, every 3 years. Our Safe Routes to School grants, applying that to the Laurel Grove Pathway project, currently in design of $332,000, and prior year reserves, i.e. the pulling from the existing roadway fund balance of $82,000. So as I mentioned, the $301,000 for improvements to Fernhill and slurry seal of Skyland. So we'll know more as the engineers' estimates come in, and there may be some adjustments to our budget for the June presentation. And the TAM Safe Routes to School Laurel Grove Avenue project, as you know, includes a new pedestrian pathway. The total cost of, it says, of $1.1 million. I'm getting estimates in from the engineer that may be with contingencies, maybe as high as $1.5 million. So that just came in like yesterday. And I have at 2 o'clock another discussion with the engineers on this project. But either way, we have a good reserve in the roadway fund to handle this type of stuff. And we do have the $400,000, what's left of the $400,000 TAM grant, which is budgeted this year at $475,000. So $75,000 of that TAM grant is for the Phase 3 extension. We did receive another grant of $75,000 in addition to the $400,000 to investigate the Phase 3 of this project, which it would extend the pathway from Canyon down to Macon Grade, basically the town limit there at the southeast side of Ross. Drainage fund projects, mainly drainage fund is, besides the local repairs and maintenance that we do, we have the storm drain master plan, which is currently being developed, and that will identify several capital projects over the next several years. The Winship Bridge expenditures are budgeted for $350,000. Funding for the HBP has been delayed until 2024, possibly later and possibly sooner as well. We are wrapping up the NEPA portion of it. We just finished on the little update on the Winship Bridge, we just finished the environmentally sensitive report that was distributed back to Caltrans and the Federated Indian Tribes of Great and Rancheria for their review. You know, the NEPA portion did require us to do additional studies for environmentally sensitive areas around Winship Bridge. They did identify some, you know, shell mounds and middens and those sort of things. So we did have to expand that survey, and this report provides the assessment of that survey. We don't expect there to be any issues with it. Everything is easily mitigated, but these reports do need to happen and they do need to be certified. We're expecting NEPA certification by August of this year, and I'll keep you updated on how that moves forward. After NEPA, we enter into the right-of-way phase of the Winship Bridge, which hopefully will be also within this fiscal year. But it's, as you know, it's hard to nail down where those how that timing is going to go. So I'm going to stop there. We covered a lot of things really quickly, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them this time.
Oh. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay.
I'll handle the next slide real quickly. So we do have other funds. The first is our public safety tax. So this, in the coming year, is going to bring in $953,000, and that will go towards our police and fire expenses. As we talked about earlier, that covers about 21% of the costs of public safety here in the town of Ross. The parcel tax will increase by CPI, so it's going to increase from the current year, it's $1,085 per parcel, and that will increase to $1,141 per parcel, and that's tied to the CPI in the area. We have another fund, the COPS fund. We've talked about that several times. It's going to be moved into the police department for accounting, simplifying accounting. And we also have a general plan update fund, and this budget has a $156,000 transfer of funds out of the general plan update fund into the operating fund to cover the cost of doing the housing element, which is part of the general plan, so an eligible use of the funds. And now we have just a quick little review of the CIP real quick that Rich will provide, and then we're done.
So, going over the near-term CIP projects, if you want to do town hall, parking repairs, and the safety parking, that's all this project right out here in the town hall. We talked about the Galena storm extension, getting into the design of that. I don't think we'll see much capital expenditure to maybe the next fiscal year. It's a pretty involved project that is extending the outfall of the Galena stream that was back in 2019. Oh, sorry. Let me just start over. So near-term CIP projects, the town hall parking repair, we did talk about just previously. That's the project just outside here. Bolinas storm drain extension is an extensive project which extends the Bolinas drain that was constructed in 2019 from the intersection of Bolinas and Sir Francis Drake. That's going to extend down Sir Francis Drake Boulevard to the Sir Francis Drake Bridge outfall. So that's rerouting the outfall that's currently at the Winship Bridge to the further downstream to provide some additional flood risk reduction to properties along Bolinas and some along Fern Hill. The Laurel Grove PED pathway extension is, we just talked about that as well. Fern Hill Avenue paving, a full 2-inch grind and overlay from Fern Hill Avenue from Shady all the way to Glenwood. So it'll be the entire roadway there. Some pedestrian safety elements. I did develop, review the comments on the Sir Francis Drake pedestrian safety email that I received. I sent that dissertation over to Krista for her review this week. So we'll be getting back to council on what can be done on those safety elements. And there are other gap closure programs that are required around town to fix some of the sidewalks along like Poplar, Redwood, and the pathways on Sir Francis Drake and Shady Lane. Not all of those will see the light of day on this coming fiscal year, but they are being considered. The porta potty enclosures, like I said, those are actually in construction now. And we will start implementing the Ross Common Landscape Master Plan, which includes the pathway rehabilitation and some of the minor modifications that were identified in the master plan that are associated with the pedestrian pathways and the modified access to those pathways. Long-term CIP projects, the Rule 20B West Ross Underground Utilities District, that is moving forward. We actually have a meeting coming up next week with PG&E on, PG&E has taken over the design of that. They're developing their own single line diagrams, and then they hand that back to our district engineer to start developing construction drawings. We do need to bring that back to council for a vote on the district. I see that happening either late next year or in 2023 or early 2024, where we bring the cost of that district and the updated assessment district values and information back to council for the neighborhood vote on that Rule 20B district. The Rule 20A underground district, now that's the portion of the town hall improvements where we want to underground these poles right out here in front of town hall to facilitate access and circulation on whatever the new design for the town hall parcel is going to be. So those two projects are related, the town hall master plan and this Rule 20A district. There are some funding challenges recently that's come out of the CPUC regarding our ability to acquire more Rule 28 credits, but we're still keeping this one on the books. We do have about $200,000 of credits, but that the Rule 28 project is a little bit over $1 million. So we'll have to figure out how that works, funding that project works into the town hall master plan. And the implementation of the storm drain master plan, those projects are currently being developed. We are looking at replacing the pedestrian bridges are getting a little bit shaky and wonky up there. They're still safe to pass and only pedestrians can pass over them. We do want to look at replacing those with more of a modern permanent type structures. Of course, the construction of the Winship Bridge carries on year by year. We're hoping to get that into construction by 2024, 2025, long term, mid to long term. And then, of course, implementing the facilities master plan as we develop that master plan and we come up with what projects that will entail. And the Fern Hill Avenue pathway, as the town manager described, we are going to develop that, the design of that, shelve it as a shovel-ready project for when Safe Routes to School funding or other type funding come along to help us move that project forward. And that's all I have for capital near and long-term projects.
Thank you very much. I had a question about the pedestrian bridges at Natalie Coffin Green Park, similar to Councilmember Brecka's suggestion about earlier. I wonder if that could go before ADR so that, you know, the bridges are safe, but kind of a nice aesthetic for the park.
Yes, definitely. And I'm looking at for those to be more type of the precast bridges that you can set in place. And they have some really nice looking bridges. They can be steel, they can be wood, or we could, you know, hire an architect to develop a design that is more in tune with Ross. But yes, I highly recommend running those designs through the ADR.
Any questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich, and that concludes our staff presentation.
Krista, thank you. I think this was really helpful. I think the timing was actually quite good. We've had much longer workshops with less accomplished. So thank you very much.
So we will be.
Can I just chime in and also just thank Liz? I know how much work you've done and you've done it for so many years. And I just want to make sure you know we all really appreciate your help.
Yeah, thank you very
Absolutely.
much. We rely on your help. Thank you so much. All right,
Yeah,
then
so
I
we'll
will-
be incorporating, there'll probably be some changes, as I mentioned, from the police department and the fire department. And we have a few things like, we have to get our final risk management, JPA numbers. We're still awaiting those, but those will be incorporated and we'll be bringing the final budget to the council on June 16th. Is there anything else, Liz, that we are going to be needing between June 16th, or are we?
Be looking at the dam calculation.
Okay. Okay. So, thank you.
Great,
Thanks for your
thank you very
time
much.
today.
Then I will adjourn this budget workshop meeting. Thank you very much.